So
Yeah,
now bring us back to you getting expelled from the university, from Haifa University, you said, right?
that's right. Yeah, yeah.
So what year
It
was
actually
that,
started.
and what led to that?
Yeah. Uh, I think that I have to say that around the year 2000, I was already, my journey was complete in many ways. Namely, I was at peace with myself. I was very sure about my moral position towards Zionism, towards the Palestinian liberation movement. I already had great friendships with Palestinians, from the PLO chairman to many others whom I met. And I was already, kind of the end product of someone who was born in Israel, was a Jew, but was definitely strongly an anti-Zionist Jew, with all the implications of that. And that was a challenge to my university already in 2000, because I made it very clear. I didn't hide it. In fact, I didn't want to hide it. I wanted to persuade other Israelis to go in the same way. I didn't treat it as my own, idea. And the university did not know how to deal with it. And then came various. They began to prepare a big file on me. So all kinds of things I did eventually they thought were enough to expel me. For example, I was one of the first person who was asked, would you support an academic boycott on Israel if Israel continues to disrespect international law? And I said yes. So
And
that
this
was
was,
a good
I'm
enough
assuming
reason.
this was in the 90s, considering the fight was
Yeah, in
already
the
being,
90s.
okay.
And then came the Tantura case where a former student, well, it wasn't even a student
Yes.
of mine, but someone I protected because he exposed in a master's degree the massacre in Tantura, which didn't even appear in Palestinian sources, although in oral history it was mentioned, but not in the work of written work of Palestinian historians like Walid Khalidi didn't mention that massacre. Well, it was very clear that he found the evidence for that massacre, and he was persecuted by the university and harassed by the university, and a lot of pressure was put on him to change the conclusion of his dissertation. And when he didn't agree, they disqualified him, and I took the lead in protecting him, which was another reason to question my loyalty to the Israeli academia and so on. They forced me to leave, and I went to teach in England in 2006.
What was life like for you in the 80s and 90s, as you obviously publishing every now and then? You are most likely upsetting or rubbing against your society because of what you're publishing, what you're stating.
I think the worst case, and I never compare what I went through, of course, to the suffering of the Palestinians under occupation or siege. So this is a far worse case than mine. But I think the worst thing for someone who is publicly descending as a professional historian in Israel is the impact, first of all, on your family, if you have small children, as I had at the time. Because what is so unique about Israel, that if you are a dissident Palestinian voice in Israel, you will be harassed by the institutions, by the Secret Service, by the police. These will be your tormentors. If you're an Israeli Jew who is descending, it is a society that would do it. It would be your neighbors. It would be your university. The threats would come from the people, not from the institutions. So you get a lot of death threats, and every now and then the politicians add to this. For instance, the Minister of Education demanded from the university to expel me. Famous broadcaster said people like me don't have the right to live, and that, of course, immediately impacts people. Luckily, nothing terrible physically happened to me, and I'm very fortunate in that. But it was not that far from that, and so life was difficult, especially if you have a family. I think individually you can always take it. In fact, it strengthens you. It makes you even more more convinced that you are right. If they are so, if they have no, they didn't have any counter arguments. They wanted to silence you. I mean, it was much more difficult for me if they had proper counter argument. If they really debated me, probably it would have been more difficult. But I understood that if they don't want to debate me, if they just want to silence me, it means that they don't have a counter argument, which means that probably my argument is right, but they don't like it. I mean, they don't like the message, and therefore they don't like the messenger. There were some light, of course, things like that. I mean, people were sending horrible things that they did in the toilet in a mail to us at home, and we never opened these envelopes, and we didn't understand why the house was thinking for so many days until we understood that people went to this level of show. I have to say that I was disappointed by the fact that so very few members of the Israeli academia stood by me. That was my biggest surprise. I thought that
And
I didn't even ask them to share my views, but just
but do you mean from a point of view of academic freedom, or do you mean it from a point of view of
from point of academic freedom?
Okay.
But say you cannot expel someone because you don't like the history that he's writing. That's ridiculous. You don't do it in a country that pretends to be a democracy or an academia that's supposed. But of course, Israel is not a democracy, and therefore they were. By the way, some of them agreed with me, but they were afraid of expressing this support. So yes, it was not easy. But again, I'm compared to the real victims of Israel. One should keep it in perspective.
Absolutely.
Right? One should not make too much out of it. But it never led to one moment of hesitation that I was not doing the right thing. I mean, I knew from the very beginning that I can withstand this attack. And if I can't teach in Israel, I will teach in England. If I can't teach in England, I will teach, I don't know, somewhere else. But that was the less of my worries. The worries was, when you have small children and so on, you kind of cast on them the responsibility for something they haven't done yet.